take a flat screwdriver. It's got a flat screwdriver fitting in there. Turn it up so you can see it. And you hold the flat screwdriver side and grab the impeller and twist it out. This one's not going to do it. You can see that it's very rusty up in here, and so therein lies the problem. So the way we're going to fix that is, first we're going to mark the motor. We're going to mark the housing because I want to put it back together exactly how it came apart. We're going to mark the front and the back, and this motor's actually been apart before, I can tell, because there's some hash marks on it. I'm going to pull the through bolts out, which are 5/16 on a 56 frame, and they're 1/4 inch on a 48. That's another way you can tell the difference between a 48 and a 56. If you have 5/16 through bolts, then it's a 56. If you've got 1/4 inch through bolts, then it's a 48. So what I did was pull the through bolts out after I marked it. Next, I'm going to tap the rear cover off first so I can get the other side out. And so there's a little bit of a lip right there, and I'm using just a brass hammer and just light tapping. Not going to damage it. Tapping the back cover off. So you can work it right off, and you see that's what it looks like inside the back. Now, some pumps has a 2-speed switch that's actually made on the back cover. This particular one, the 2-speed switch, which is right here, is actually slid in. So you can, once you take the cover off, you can actually pull the switch out. You can see I'm not going to pull it out, but it will come out. It basically pinches in at the bottom and at the top in these slots. The cover goes on it, and that's what holds it in place. Next, I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to tap the front cover loose. So now I can pull, you can see I pulled the entire stator out. Now this one has been damaged right here. You can see that this part of the fan, which is actually plastic, has gotten damaged. Something got caught in it. And I can see that the bearing, if you look right in there, you can see that the bearing has started coming apart. So we definitely have a bearing issue here. So I'm going to get set up. We're going to put this in a vise, pull the bearing, pull the impeller off, pull the bearing out, change it, and put it all back together. Stay tuned. All right, so we've got the vise, and what I do is I put something in it to protect the stator, because we don't want to damage the stator or damage any part of it. I'm going to stick this down in the vise so we can put some pressure on it. And you don't have to really over tighten it, just snug it up. Just like that. Now I'm going to see if I can turn the impeller off with my fingers, with my hand, and the answer is I can. So if you can't do it with your hands, that's actually a good sign. Then I would use oil filter pliers. I've had these pliers for over 30 years. In fact, about 32 years. So the back of the impeller you can see is damaged right there. It should have a shaft on it, and it should look like that right there. Pull that. It should have that shaft on it. You can see the difference right there. So we're going to replace the shaft and put a new seal on. That's the wet end part. This is the volute, which is the back, and you can see that it was leaking. So now we're going to pull this part off so I can get to the, and it still turns, it's just rough. You see, I should be able to just spin it and it just go, and you can see it won't spin. It stops. So I'm going to take the plate off. Just tap it on it with a brass hammer. Just go easy, and if it spins, you can see it comes off a lot easier. Now you can actually see that the bearing, you can see that the back part, this part, the little rubber piece that holds the grease in it, was out. So this bearing has actually come apart on the inside, and it's very rough. So I'm going to change this bearing, and also the back bearing's rough. Once we change this, I'll show you the back bearing. But we're going to clean this up and pull this bearing off and get her all ready to go. Stay tuned. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is take a 3/8 by 16 die, and I'm going to thread chase it. And you can see those threads are actually in good shape. But if you need to know, for all standard American pumps, Waterway, Aqua-Flo, sta-rite, Vico, Power-Rite, all of those different brands, the Balboa brands, which is Vico or sta-rite, this is the right thing. This will not work on the Guangdong Chinese. It's completely different. So what I do is I take a knurl out of the inside of the impeller. So if you look at that impeller, you see that there's a brass fitting inside there. So the brass fitting that's actually inside the Aqua-Flo is different than this one. It actually has a head on it. So it works great for this. So what I do is break my impeller open and use that to go on here. So in this case, I'm using one out of a different kind of pump, and I'm using a socket as the flat part, but this actually has a dome on the top of it. So the next thing I would do is I'm going to apply just a little bit of heat to ensure that the bearing is loose, but I don't want to apply much heat because this does have a plastic fan right here, and I don't want to damage the fan. So I'm not going to put much heat on here. I'm going to let me clean it with my file first real quick. I'm going to put this under here. I'm going to take a file and I'm going to just clean up right around the bearing edge, which this one is actually graduated down just a hair right there. So it's usually not an issue with these getting them off. All right, I'm going to apply just a little more heat. Not too much heat. All right, now I'm going to put my safety glasses and my gloves on. While that thing is getting ready, because we're going to be dealing with a little bit of heat right here. So you're probably not going to have this tool. I have the luxury of this, so you've got to use a bearing puller or a 2-prong or a 3-prong puller, but this is what I use. It's very simple, and it cages the bearing. Okay, now, and I like to use the impact on this particular tool because it gives it an extra degree of pull because it's actually hammering it just a little bit. So here we go. Glasses on. Now I'm going to have to pull my socket off because it's larger than the hole in the puller, but I'm not going to have to put much more pressure, so it'll be just fine. So there is your bearing. You can see it was a clean pull. It pulled right off. No issues. And this bearing was definitely bad. You can see that it came apart on the inside. You can see the guts are trying to come out, and what happened was it moved this thing forward, or moved it forward, and this started hitting and it tore it up, and it also caused it to leak. So we're going to put a brand new bearing on. I'm also going to pull the rear bearing. I'm going to show you real quick on the rear bearing. This bearing has a little issue. Let me see if I can get it to stick through where you can see it. We're going to do the same thing on the rear. Just it doesn't have the shaft that you got to deal with. But look at this bearing. See? You hear it? That bearing is bad. It should spin. And it's stopping. So I'm just going to cage it. Same way. And in this case, you can actually press on the back of the shaft with your puller. No big deal. There we go. Pull right off. So this bearing is not bad in the same sense that the front one is bad, but it needed to be replaced anyway because it is rough. So you can actually hear it. It's got that roughness to it, plus you can see grease coming out of it. You see that? So that's a no-go. So I'm going to press the bearings on momentarily. Stay tuned. Alright, now we're ready to put the bearing back on. I'm going to put the bearing on the back part first. So what I'm going to do is use my same setup that I had before. And you notice this has a little stopper on it. So that's the stopping point for your bearing. So you find a socket that will fit over the shaft. You can see that will actually go over the shaft. That touches the inside of the bearing. And that's the appropriate socket. And then you just use your hammer and just simply tap it into place. It's just that simple. You see that? And you see that it's right up against the little snap ring. Alright, to put the other side on, you flip it over. Now I'm going to have to remove this part right here now in order to get it on there, because the socket will not fit down over that part because it's a hair bigger than the shaft. Get that out of the way. Take the new bearing, just drop it down there. Take the socket, put it over. Actually, I'll use this side. You actually hear it change sounds when it gets to the bottom. You see that's all the way in right there. So now we're going to put this back in the motor. I'm going to get set up for that. Stay tuned. Alright, so we've got this part ready. I've got the other part ready. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my faceplate, and you can see that it's a little bit dirty, so I'm going to clean it up real quick. And there's not really that much in it, but I'm going to get the grime out of here, and we'll go to the next step. We're just about ready to put her together. Alright, now I've got this clean. You can see I just cleaned the grease and the grime out of it. Now I'm going to take it, and the way I'd put that on is you can start it with your hands, but it's not going to go completely on. All I'll do is just take my little brass hammer and just kind of spin it as I'm tapping it in place. And it is all the way on. You can see that it's in there. And it broke these little spokes off the fan, but I don't think that that's going to make it overheat. It's still got enough on there, so we're going to proceed with this. So you just slip your stator back in. And remember, we marked the faceplate. Push it through. And there's our mark. Tap it into place. Now on the back, I'm going to simply put it up there and slip it into place, and you can see I've got a mark right there as well. And there is, on the back, there is a wave washer, by the way, back here. You can see that it's right there. So I got her all cleaned up, and you can see there's the wave washer that goes back there. I got that little bit of grease out of there that was from coming out of the old bearing that had started coming apart. And I'm going to just gently tap this into place and line it up, and you can see that lines and this lines. Now I'm going to stick my through bolts through and put nuts on the front of them. I'm just going to do 2. I'm going to do 1. And I'm going to do 2. Sometimes you got to mess with these through bolts a little bit to get them lined up because there's a hole that they go through in the magnet. There she goes. And then just put a nut on the front on each one of them. And I'm going to take my impact and lightly tighten them. Now I'm going to take my hammer and kind of tap the 2 sides that didn't have the through bolt in it. Make sure everything is nice and snug. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this pump 115 volts and clean this shaft up. So stay tuned, I'll show you how to do it. Alright, so this right here is what we're going to do. We're going to take this back plate off. And you're going to find the black and the white wire. You can see there, right there, there's black, which is low speed, and there's white, which is the neutral, but it's hot on a 220 pump. And if you look right here, it actually shows you that this is common. That's high speed, which would be red in this case. This is low speed. So 2 is low, 1 is high, and 5 is common. You see that? So when you're looking in the back here, that's what it's going to be. And another way you could do this, now I'm doing this with a 110 volt source. So I'm pulling the white wire off and I'm going to put my white wire on there from a 110 volt. And when I say 110, 110, 120, 125 is all the same thing. And then pulling the black wire off, because all we need to do is just spin the motor enough that we can use it like a lathe. And so I'm going to hook my black wire right here, and then I'm going to undo ground and hook my ground wire. And it's just that simple, and see, I'm going to be able to plug this in the wall. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is plug this in, power it up. And it will not hurt it to run on 110. It just won't run as fast as it normally would, and you don't need to run it long. So the first thing you're going to do after you put your safety glasses on is take a pair of pliers that's hardened and just touch this. All that loose rust off of there. Next, if there's any big stuff, it'll knock that off. You take your file and just run it. Take that little edge off. And what happens is when this thing gets water on this shaft, the shaft metal expands when it gets wet. So it'll bow out a little bit. You want to make it where it will easily, get it with a wire brush and clean it up. So now we're going to check our work. We're going to take a flat screwdriver, stick it in the back, hold the shaft, and this should just screw right on. See how easily that's going on? You want it to bottom completely out. Just like that. So that shaft is clean and in good shape and ready for the seal on the impeller. What I've just shown you how to do doesn't just work with this pump, it works with basically any brand. They're all very, very similar. And you see the parts that I replaced. Busted impeller, new seal set, 2 bearings. We have them all in the store. If you look over my head, you can click that banner and it will take you to the Flowmaster series parts that these are in. If you don't need Flowmaster, go to that website, click that and go to the website where you see Flowmaster. Click in the box on the top left, or the, yep, top left, actually be your top left, yep, and put in your brand. Waterway, sta-rite, Aqua-Flo, Vico, Guangdong LX, put them in. I don't know much, but I do know hot tubs. I am the spa guy, and we are Hot Tub Parts of America.